And in fact, if you look at my on my website, my business motto is be found, be seen, be trusted. A blog recently called "You Cannot Scale a Handshake," but you create an environment to. If you're a good person and a nice person and a kind person, you know when to turn off the salesperson in you and say that's enough.
Hello everyone, today we have a new episode with our new guest, Marc Charette. Am I spelling your name correct?
You're saying it right. Well done.
He's a founder and also an SEO expert, more about a local SEO, but more also into photographers, around 360 and so on. But we're going to let him explain a little bit more about business, and then we jump more into local SEO. So once again, welcome, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I know you mentioned earlier before we start recording that you worked in photography a long time ago, but you're still into. So let's hear a little bit about how you joined into this industry and how it's going from your end.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for what happened for me, because my going. It's probably good to give a little more context in terms of how I actually got into it, because I didn't wake up one day and think, oh my goodness, I think I'm a fantastic photographer and I should go and just open a business. It was more accidental. So my background, I used to be a retailer. I managed Radio Shack stores for 10 years, way back when, and then I went from that to being in financial services. So as a sales representative, selling insurance and financial products. Then became a trainer. So I started training financial planners for a company called Metropolitan Life, and then eventually it was Sun Life, and then my wife and I decided to move to Australia, and it was at that point in time that I made a pretty big change. I should also mention that during those years, I was also a mobile DJ. So I used to do weddings and Christmas parties and stuff like that as a sideline business. So I was always one of these people who had the intent to be entrepreneurial, but it was always a sideline. And then when I moved to Australia, I kind of started thinking, well, am I going to find a job or will I have to create a job? But initially went into sales, and again, selling in the advertising space. So that gave me an idea of what makes Australia similar and different to Canada, where I'm originally from. And then from there, another stint into electronics retail and AV installations. And then I went back into the world of doing advertising sales, but that's where I picked up the camera in that last role before I started my own business. It was a contract job, and I was selling advertising in the tourism industry. And it was for these touch screens, these big, back in the day before people had iPhones in their pocket, they would go to a touch screen at the visitor information center, and you would touch the ad and it would give you information. Well, people would obviously have to supply you the photos, and sometimes they wouldn't supply me the nicest photos. So I'd say to these clients, I said, do you mind if I take a couple of extra pictures for you so that we can make your ad look better? And their response usually was, yeah, sure. And then, surprise to me, they'd say, we really like those photos. Can we buy them? They wanted it for their print material and other things. And I'm like, oh, my photos must be better than I thought they were. I mentioned this to a friend of mine who was an SEO guy. I played badminton with him. We hang out, and we were on our way to a badminton meet. And I told him about this experience, like I'm telling you now. And he says to me, Marc, if you're selling, more photography now, he says, well, why don't you go shoot for Google? And I go, shoot for Google? What does that mean? He says, well, there's this program. I don't know that much about it, but I'll send you the link. So he sends me the link, and I look at it. And what had happened is that Google had started probably 3 years prior to that, but they were still involved in the managing of this process of adding Google Street View as an element of a visual element inside a Google My Business listing, what used to be called Google My Business, what we now call Google Business Profile. And it was like, okay, but you had to qualify, you had to apply, you had to send proof of your image capability, your photographic capabilities. So I sent that stuff in, and I had to wait. So I waited several months. I started selling for a guy who was doing this kind of stuff. I was more interested in doing my own thing. So I went on, and eventually got that email saying, "Congratulations, you're part of the program." And I was like, "Oh, okay, this is cool." So, and the beauty behind it, and it didn't last long. It lasted 2 months. Is that particular program? Google were actually telling you or giving you the leads. So I didn't even have to look for the clients. They would say, just, here's who you're going to shoot. They would even tell you how much you charge, so you automatically understood what the pricing model was. So they had quality standards that you had to go through. So I did that, and within 2 months of me doing this, Google said, "Oh, we're going to stop supplying you the leads, but you can continue to do it and continue to use Google on your business card or your marketing if you so wish. But you must still shoot at the same quality standards." Okay. So now I had to find my own clients. So it changes. It sort of kind of slowly brought me into the idea of, now I've got to run this business myself. And of course, you could imagine, if I've got Google trusted photographer on my business card, people see Google on your business card.
Yeah.
First they think
and
you
I
work
hear
for Google.
Google.
They think you work for Google. I said, no, I don't work for them. And just because I'm trusted simply means that I have the authority to publish on their platform on your behalf. But they still think that I know a lot about it. And I happen to have a lot of that. Why I have shared with you all the other business knowledge I've got and experiences is that I have that sense of business experience and the empathy to understand what it's like to be the person on the other side of the experience who's buying advertising, because I've had to do that. So I know how difficult it can be to know, what should I do next? How do I fix my visibility online? Because the concern I had. So I was able to actually understand how to help people from not just what I was selling, but also what they needed overall and where the concerns were. Because of course, there's always a competing challenges. Like, you still have to do other forms of advertising. You may have costs with HR and your leasing and your products and customer service and all these. So I'm aware of that side. So with that in mind, it was really a helpful background for me to actually help people with the overall how to optimize their Google business profiles thoroughly. And that's how I ended up in the local SEO space. It was sort of accidental, but it still remains that even today that the core of my offer is really the photography, because as you would know, a good Google business profile without great photos it's incomplete.
That's what makes them good.
That's right. Mm.
Yeah, that's interesting. So interesting experience, and how you met with this kind of job that you already are working on. So if we go and try to analyze in Australia, because you mentioned that you moved from Canada, I think the algorithm are pretty much the same, the one that you had in Canada, or we have everywhere in the world. But how do you think that have evolving and changed the algorithm for local businesses, exclusively the one that doing photography and videos?
Yeah, it's actually a lot of it. The principles haven't changed that much. And in fact, if you look at my on my website, my business motto is be found, be seen, be trusted. Those are the three principles, right? It's still the same. People are going to, if they want something, they're going to look for it. So if you can't be found, well, you got a problem. So solve that first. Then when they find you, what do you look like? Do you actually present yourself properly? Right? That has never changed, and it will never change. And be trusted. In other words, if someone's done business with you and they say nice things about you, and other people hear that's what earns you the trust through the reviews that you get. So that's essentially what I built my business around. So the principles over the years in terms of what's involved in creating good SEO is the same. That's never going to change. I don't think you're ever going to see a major change in the world of SEO in that respect, because the principles of being a good business is still the foundation. You've got to give the client what they want. It's basics. It's not hard. Be a good person, be a good business owner, price your products well, care about your clients, do right by them. It's really quite simple.
But for someone that is already working as an agency and also as a one man, sometimes how hard is to be able to get qualified leads in this kind of industry, for especially for Google Business Profile?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is by far the most challenging thing. And what I've found is that it does actually ebb and flow. It changes in terms of what methods work best. And you have to have multiple methodologies. Not like the number one for me was literally door knocking. That was always that's how I started my business. After Google stopped giving me leads, I literally would go and visit businesses, a pack of business cards, some brochures in my hand, and my mobile phone with examples of prior shoots that I had done. And I would go to the front desk, and my job was to basically pass the gatekeeper. Get past the gatekeeper.
First.
So if that's and the gatekeeper usually is the reception or the first person who greets me, because if they aren't the decision maker, and they rarely are, I have to get them so excited about what I'm doing that they have to go running to the boss and say, "Hey, you got to talk to this guy. This is really cool. We got to have some of this." So my job is
definitely you gotta face a lot of no's in this process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As they say in the world of sales, and as I had said earlier, like I spent many years being a sales trainer, right? When I was in the insurance industry, every no is getting you closer to the yes. It's that simple. If you don't get any no's, you aren't getting close to a yes, because there eventually will be one.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I would talk to 30, 40 people in a day. And I'd have to sort through the business cards, call them back, send an email, do the follow-ups. And out of that, I was actually achieving a reasonable amount of business, enough for me to be able to, and always, the other thing to keep in mind is that the physical size of the premises is what determined how big the client was going to be. So I would actually gauge who I was approaching based on, I know this is going to be a $500 tour versus a $2,000 tour versus, so I knew how to actually, because I know that those bigger jobs, I didn't need to do as many of them. Yeah. So like if I've got a couple of big jobs that week and I say, hey, you know what, I can fill it in with a couple of small ones, I would actually be marketing myself towards the filler jobs that I could actually manage.
Yeah, it's also a quote who says, I don't know who said it, but if you know that you're going to fail 100 times to get a success, would you wait and rush to fail as fast as you can to get to that?
That's right. So, exactly.
But
that's
you mentioned
exactly it.
You work in sales, and how do you think is most crucial thing when dealing with people and trying to sell them in a way that they are ready to buy?
The biggest thing for me with that really is you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you said that they're ready to buy, because selling really should get to the point whereby you're not actually having to sell. All right, like if you actually have to keep selling, then that means that they're a reluctant buyer, and you don't want a reluctant buyer. There are times when a reluctant buy might feel or look like a reluctant buy, but it's actually more what's the FOMO buy, fear of missing out buy, which is fine, because that means that they're actually wanting it anyway. They're still self-convinced. You don't have, otherwise, because that's where you get problems with pushback, pricing, pushbacks, those kinds of things. So, one of the things that I would do in sales techniques, and this is one of the things that I'm sure your listeners will appreciate, is to use one of two different lines, communication styles, ways of speaking, that would help people know, really that first, number one, you're not going to be too pushy and you're there to help. And secondly, that you approach them where they're at. In other words, if they are the kind of people who like to say no, then you'll use one phrasing. And if they're the kinds of people who always say yes, you say a different phrasing. And it's for the no people, you start your statements with, would you have any objection? Would you have any objection? So in other words, if I say, would you have any objection if I showed you what I do? Would you have any objection if I show you some of my sample tours? You would say no, but that means yes.
Yes, show me. So
okay.
Yeah, that's
but for someone, and then for someone who is more of a yes person, then you could say, would you be open for me to show you some of my sample tours?
Small, simple, but
Small
very
language,
crucial. Yeah.
very crucial in the languaging, because what it does is it keeps the conversation in your control, but with their permission.
Yeah, with their permission and approval, and you're still very close to share what you have. Yeah, that's very.
That's right.
It's interesting because the most secrets are very simple. The one that you said, the way you said it, it makes complete sense. But actually, when I reverse of if I ever use that idea, I'm not sure. But that actually makes sense.
Yeah, it takes practice. You have to get comfortable with the language. The one thing that you have to remember with any new language in sales conversations is it requires practice. It must. This is where my experience of having been a DJ and holding a microphone and talking to lots of people gave me a lot of confidence to just say things that I know I'm going to fumble initially until I get it right.
Yeah. So public speaking actually helped for you, right?
Oh, absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. It became a critical element in my learning of how to be a better communicator.
Okay. But since we're here, I'm very intrigued with a few things like the voice, the body language, and then what you have to say. So what do you think about these three things that I think are very important?
Yeah, when it comes to voice, basically one of my favorite things to note is having to do with pacing. It's if someone speaks fast, then you know that they're a fast speaker. You shouldn't try to pace exactly like them, but maybe pick up your own pace a little wee bit. Like
when to
try
pause,
to catch up
when
to
to
them.
lower your voice and put it higher and so on.
Tone. Yeah,
to
exactly.
play with the tone.
Play with it. That's right. Sound, and always remain interesting and curious. Right. That's the best place to be, because then you're allowing everyone wants to be in control of the conversation. That's just the nature of things, right? So give people some room to be in control of the conversation. And the moment you give it to them, then it's the moment that you have control of the conversation, because you gave it to them. It was your permission that created the environment where you're allowing them to speak. You're giving them the space to be themselves. So that's where I talk about, when you're, depending on your tone, you speed up or slow down. The next thing is and when it comes to body language, is number one, find the baseline. Everyone has a baseline of behavior, because some people say that eye shifting to the left means they're making stuff up, and no, it's not all those kinds of things. And that comes from the neuro-linguistic programming space. And that's misunderstanding the pretext that in communication, you're still required to have the baseline understanding of what basically is how people behave normally. Once you know that, then you look for changes or shifts in that behavior. So if they're normally very calm and then they get fidgety, or they start tapping their feet, or they're constantly grabbing guys with beards, we start doing this. Like if you're not doing that normally, and you start doing that, that's a sign that there's something happening going on. And then it means more of something, and all of those things you can learn by taking a good NLP communications course, then start to make sense.
So you're also saying, don't nap with your legs, and also don't touch your chins and face.
Well, actually, all those things are fine. You can do them all, and it's all okay. And it's about more watching what the other person's doing, understanding what their behavior is like. And then if somebody, like, for example, and you probably have seen this before, just in person, when you're standing around, if two people are standing talking to each other and their arms are crossed, all right, and you come up and you go to shake their hands, right, to introduce yourself, or at a networking event, something like that, the next thing you know, you'll probably cross your arms too. You just will. Right? Because it's just what these other people are doing. So you kind of you match the environment that you're in. And what you do is you fit in more. It's people are looking for a way of fitting in, and they want others to fit in with them. Right? So, yeah.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah. So that's from a sales skills point of view. And then, of course, I go back to the first thing I was talking about, which is essentially your closing techniques and your, would you be open, or would you have any objection, those kinds of things. And there's also the assumptive close, which is very often one of the more powerful ones. Is basically just assuming that everything's cool, or you're just looking for a time to complete the process. It's like, allow them, or and another one is there anything I haven't covered, that any further questions before we proceed? Just ask. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we continue? Just ask a question that says,
So
are we ready?
To be more specific in closing, so in part of the world, everything is online. And how do you think you should react if someone says, "Yeah, I like the idea. I don't have any question, and I'll get back to you"?
The I'll get back to you is totally cool. You know what? It's like, I'm not averse to saying, happy to get, let's catch up again a little bit later on. But in the meantime, is there anything else that you would require for you to be able to make a full and thorough and complete decision? Just ask them, is there anything else that you need from me now so that you can make a decision? Is there anything missing? And if it's, because usually that's when you'll uncover, is it that they are the kinds of people who just need to sleep on it? Okay. Or they might actually tell you, oh, I have to talk to my business partner, or whatever the case is. So if totally cool, and just make sure that you get a commitment to time as to when you'll follow up, and never give up. This business about following up is one of the hardest to do, but most important, and keep following up. And just always kind, always friendly reminders. Always like, just, how's it going? But set a time as much as possible, a time and a date for that follow-up each time, if you can, whether it be online or in person.
Yeah, that's actually interesting to follow up. Sometimes I feel like it's intrigue and put them in a spot. But yeah, the way you said it actually makes much more sense.
Yeah. The moment that they say, because you actually want them to be at peace with saying no to you if it's going to be a no, and not so that you don't waste your time. Because if you keep asking for follow-ups, then they'll know that, oh, this is never going to end. This guy's got to keep hounding me until I say no. So I might as well say no so I get it over with, right? That you're kind of helping them say no if it's going to be a no anyway, and you're not wasting time. And if they're still intrigued and they're still saying, could, well, you know what? The fact of the matter is, it still might be a good idea for you to follow up, because they might still be interested. They might just not be ready yet.
Actually makes sense. So in regards to getting clients, because we're talking around this kind of area of when an agency needs to get sales in order to survive at first place. So, but what do you think would be the best channel to use? Like to use as a magnet, like use social media, use perhaps podcasts, use videos, use LinkedIn posts and so on, like use as a magnet or as a bait so they can come to you, or direct? Like why?
I think every method is good, and you have to literally, like, for me to prescribe what is the way to do it would be inappropriate, because every business, every industry, every person, from both the buying and the selling experience, is different. So you have to be testing a lot of these methods, because quite honestly, the vast majority of my business today comes from referrals. It's no longer door knocking. I do some door knocking once in a while, but for the most part, it's actually when I go to a networking event and I get to know people. And then what happens is that one-on-one handshake. In fact, actually, if you look on my website, I've written a blog recently called "You Cannot Scale a Handshake," because everybody's talking about scaling their businesses. Yeah, but try scaling a handshake. See how that goes for you. You can't do that, right? So that's why I'm a big believer of in-person marketing. And then use the technologies as the reminder outreach. That's the way I do it. Do I actually sell online? Yes, a little bit. For the most part, though, it's really a way for me to remain relevant to others, because this is another one of those things, one of those phrases that I think is a good catch one for people to realize in the world of networking and in business. It doesn't matter who you know. It doesn't. People say, who you know is how you get. Like, if you know lots of people, you can. No, it's who knows you. It's not a matter of who you know. Yeah. It's a matter of who knows you, so because you have to be memorable. You have to be memorable. So if you're memorable and people remember who you are, they recognize your face, they recognize your tone of voice, they recognize your product. And in my case, I've actually got my brand on the back of my car. Everybody says, "Oh, I saw your car in front of so and so's office. Were you doing the shoot for him?" Like they see it. So it's like because they recognize me as a brand. They know that that's who I am. So it's not that whole thing of making sure you get found broadly. You are, some people call it developing a personal brand. It can actually even be a business brand, because who knows, you can also be, if you've got a number of employees working with you and they all drive cars that are, completely wrapped in your business branding, well, then that can help too. So again, that same thing. You have to make sure that you spread your message broadly from a visibility perspective.
Yeah, and what about those cases when the numbers are low? So not ever. So should we be more patient and keep up the good work and then wait for the results, or we can be satisfied because we're doing our best?
Well, usually if the numbers are low and it's not enough to sustain your business, or if you're actually not succeeding to the level that you want to, that's the moment when you start to look at essentially either trying different marketing strategies or look at your product. Sometimes it's literally you're selling the wrong thing, or at least to those people. So it's always you're always solving a problem. In the end, all that products do is solve a problem. That's all that whether we call it a product or a service, the same thing. It's like whenever I do training on local SEO to get it a little bit onto the Google Business Profile side, I always tell my clients that products are your services and your services are your products. They're the same. So when you actually fill out all the product information on your Google Business
Even
Profile,
if they are services,
put them in the services too, and do the same thing by both ways, because really they are the same. So when you actually are helping someone, you're solving a problem with your products and your services. So just make sure there's a fit. Like it might be that if I'm door knocking the wrong area of town, I'm not going to get the right result. If I'm knocking, but if I go to the right part of town, maybe I'll get a better result. But that's assuming my product didn't change. If I go back to the place where I was having less success, maybe it's a matter of selling something different. For example, if I'm in the industrial parks, I'm not going to sell too many virtual tours. That's just not that popular a thing in an industrial park. But there are other services that they do require, like, for example, maybe product photography. They may require that because they be manufacturers. They may require headshots of the team. They may need, they might need video. Those are the things that they'll need. The virtual tour will be less interesting because people don't really want to showcase a walkthrough of an industrial spaces. It's almost like telling their trade secrets. So they're not going to want that. But in this retail space, car dealerships and gyms or shopping centers, that kind of thing, then the virtual tour makes a lot more sense because it's about showing your business. You want people to see what your business looks like. That's why they'll go there, right? So it's about knowing, is there a product fit in that sense? So, if you're having a lack of success, look at, are you actually talking to the right people? And are you actually matching the product or service that actually has a way of solving a problem for them?
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for explaining it in so much details. So since you do have a lot of experience, and we can see that, we want to give as much possible information for the users who can possibly watch this as well. So let's stay a little bit on sales between people or businesses as well. Where do you think people that are trying to sell make the most mistakes?
Oh, the single biggest mistake, it's quite simple. Going back to what I said earlier on, lack of follow-up. It's the biggest one. Yeah, literally.
So they gave you a chance, but they're busy, so you have to follow up.
When you're in sales,
might that be rude at some point?
Well, what it is, it is if you go too far, but you create an environment if you're a good person and a nice person and a kind person, you know when to turn off the salesperson in you and say, that's enough. And you should just stop. But don't stop until it's time to stop, and be nice about it. If people are happy to say no to people that they're not feeling threatened by, right? Like it should never get to that point where it becomes adversarial in any way, shape, or form. Like maybe there are some industries where that's possible. Maybe, I don't know, some lawyers might do that. I don't know, but it's that's not my thing. When I look at it, is very much that of just approach the follow-up as, does your problem still exist, customer? And do I still feel like my product, my services is the solution to the problems that you still have? Is there still a match? So until they tell you, no, it's not what I want, or I'm solving the problem in a different way, thank you very much, that's okay. And even when they say no, it's, would you be open to me staying in touch with you? Notice I just used that line again, right? Would you be open to me staying in touch with you just in case things change at your end? Oh yeah, that's cool. Oh, that's a great way to make sure that you don't get put into their spam folder for emails. You can continue to communicate with them. So stay in touch. Keep the lines, because the fact of the matter is if you're really nice, what happens in many situations is, if you're such a nice person about the sales process, they'll realize that maybe they didn't want your product and it wasn't a good fit for them, and that's totally cool. But they probably know people that you could solve a problem for. Next thing you know, the people who said no to you become the best referrers of your products or services, because now they really understand the problem you solve. They understand it very well because you've pitched it to them so much in a very kind and gentle way, right? And now they are in a good position to say, hang on a second, I've got 3 of my customers that could buy this service. It'd be good for them. Let me just put this guy in touch with those guys. And I've had a lot of those. I've actually had people who've said no to me, and then say almost instantly, hey, no, it's not for me, but I know I can introduce you to 2 other people that I think would be really interested in what you're offering. Great. Thank you very much. So no becomes a yes in a different way.
And then a lead becomes very qualified.
Right. It's a pre-qual, and it's an introduced lead, which is even more powerful.
Yeah.
Right. So, because usually the other thing too with those is, if people say, just go talk to so-and-so, ask if you can be introduced. Always ask to be introduced, because the moment that someone else introduces you, the barrier of opening the conversation is already broken. It's so powerful. Yeah. Like, one of the things that I love to do for people whenever I'm in a situation where, because I got people pitching stuff to me all the time. You would not believe how many editors in the photography space want to edit my photos, and I do my own editing. I get pitched all the time. But if they're really good and I can see that they're a good fit for somebody else, I'm more than happy to introduce them to someone else.
Yeah. That actually new for me to hear, but that actually makes huge sense. The way you said, because I also have some experiences the way you said it, but I haven't thought the way you're saying it. But it actually makes sense, because that's the truth. And actually, it breaks that barrier if somebody gives you a referral. As you mentioned, law firms or lawyers, we work with the lawyers a lot. And it's extremely hard to pass that barrier that you said, like, let's say the first one, like it's an assistant or somebody. It's extremely hard, and sometimes impossible to go and talk to the owner or the lawyer, the guy in charge. But if you get a referral, it's easier. The chances that you might sign up are very high. So you just need to pass the first stage, because they need the service, they need your products, but they're not going to meet you. Yeah, because that's not how they work.
That's exactly it. Yeah. In fact, actually, I would go so far as to say, like, in your situation, if I can suggest an idea for you directly, with these, if you actually have a situation where a lawyer does say no to you, that's the perfect opportunity. If you feel like you've given them enough information about how you solve people's problems, that they would then be able to describe it to someone else, or at least that they could understand it well enough to know who it would fit. It's a perfect opportunity to ask them, thanks very much for letting me know that this is not a really good fit for you. But with that in mind, and this is another one, with that in mind, I always do that flip. Okay, with that in mind, would you know of anyone that you feel that this would be appropriate for, that you could refer me to? Just ask. Because they might go, because lawyers probably have customers, and those customers probably have businesses, and those businesses might be needing your services.
Yeah, one word can give you a lead. So
That's right.
actually,
That's right.
that's
Well,
all
yeah,
you got to
just
do. And if they mention this, the chances that it will reach to you, they are very high. So
exactly,
that makes
exactly,
everything easier.
exactly it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
if we stop a little bit more on
Mm,
Google Business Profile or GMB,
sure.
uh,
Yep, yep.
how you're actually helping your clients at this stage.
Mm, okay, so the core service that I provide in Google Business Profile Optimization and in local SEO overall is based on the premise that I look at Google Business Profile for local businesses as sometimes not only as important as their website, sometimes it can actually even be more important than their website because it's the port of call, point of entry, and the most visible one on Google. It's, to put it in a different way, what part of Google Business Profile did you not hear me say is usually what I say to clients. It's got the word Google in it, right? And so therefore, why would you not want to optimize the single most important digital asset online on their own platform? Like, it is Google's asset. So, and they're giving you the opportunity for free in terms of they don't charge you to use the asset. It might cost you a little bit of money to have me help you do it, unless you can do it yourself. But obviously, focusing on optimizing the content on a Google Business Profile is like, it's like sweeping and cleaning up the front door and shining up the windows to your business so that people can see it clearly when they're driving by, and making sure there's no cars parked or trucks parked in front of your signage. They can see who you are, where you are, clearly, digitally, because otherwise they just keep driving.
Well,
you
that's
know,
tough.
they'll just miss you. They'll go to the next guy who's like, it's so and so supply, whatever the case might be. Maybe you're looking to, buy cleaning supplies for your pool or whatever the case is, right? And if you keep driving because you didn't see it, well, that's because you didn't optimize your Google Business Profile, digitally speaking. So optimizing that is really critical. And for me, it starts usually, as much as I possibly can, by doing a local SEO audit. And that audit is where what I'll do is I'll ask for them to add me on as a manager on the Google Business Profile. And then I'll use a tool. I use Bright Local. I'm sure you probably may have heard of those guys. There's,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of tools. But Bright Local and White Spark are probably amongst the two best tools that I know of. And the folks at both these companies, Darren
What's
Shaw.
Darren Shaw is Canadian.
Yes, he is. Yeah, and I've actually he's such an entertaining guy. I
Yeah.
love his,
Podcast
I
and
love,
his videos.
but
And,
his videos over this past winter when he was doing these shorts while he's skiing, like, that was hilarious. It was good fun. I love. Yeah, so I've commented on a lot of his stuff. He and I actually wrote
yeah,
an
I
article
also
for him
comment on
on this
in
stuff.
his stuff as well. So
Yeah, yeah. He's a cool guy. He's a really cool guy. But I use Bright Local primarily because it is probably the most utilitarian tool I've got available to me to do an audit. So I'll actually run that to get a better sense of where the business is at, and it gives me the opportunity to ask questions like, what are the keywords? I can do a little more research in that space. I can also look at really possible problems, errors, like things like, for example, a lot of cases, as you would know, if a business relocates, they sometimes forget to change their address on all the other directories outside of Google. And that has a net impact. And people, there was a time when the only game in town was citations and directories. That was the only way to all you had to do was do that, and it was good enough.
Yeah.
Then it started to drop off. But ever since we've got the world of LLMs, the world of AI, citations have come back in their importance because, I'll use an exact example that I had after doing an audit for a client of mine. She's a bookkeeper. And I said to her, what we're going to do to demonstrate really what I feel is an important next step for you is to do a ChatGPT voice search. Okay. So I just pulled up my phone and I said, hey, ChatGPT, can you find me a bookkeeper in East Gosford? Because that's where she was. And it came up with her name right away. And she goes, wow, it found me. I said, that's not the real point. I said, watch my second question. My follow-up question is the most important. I said, ChatGPT, please tell me how you found this business and why you chose it. Okay. And the answer came back, oh, actually, I found it on this directory listing. She says,
Or
I actually,
citation.
and it was not Google. It was actually the local Chamber of Commerce for which she had no longer been a member of.
But
So
it
the
was.
listing was wrong and old.
But
And she went, oh my goodness, it's actually giving out wrong data, yet it still found me. So it woke her up
Let's
to
update that.
all those nuances of things that are going on that are problems, right? So I said, this is why it's important to make sure that all of these platforms, because we're in early stages with AIs, and we know that it's going to be using a lot of data that's outside. Like, and the way I looked at it is, I'm using ChatGPT because I know that they have a relationship with Bing, and I thought probably it would pick up Bing
Yeah.
because that's part of the
Big
Microsoft
location.
funding deal and all that, right? Whereas if I had Gemini, I would have expected it to
Google.
maybe use Google, right? And of course that may or may not be still the case today. That obviously that changes a lot as the algorithms change over time. But the key is to demonstrate that you don't really know where people are going to find you or how you're going to be presented. So being correct across all the areas possible that you can't hurt. If anything, it just protects you from getting the wrong data or somebody else getting the upper edge on you. So that's one of the ways in which I do my audits. So I'll actually do the Bright Local audit, and then I'll actually do a couple of searches in that way. Make sure we've got the keywords. I'm a big fan of using the map pins as a method to work out exactly where people are showing up. And I like to watch, is it a hard drop off, or is it a gradual drop off? Did they go from being number 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 10 to, or is it 1, 1, 1, 10, that kind of thing. So it's like you want to make sure you understand exactly where people are showing up. And then it's simply going back in and cleaning that stuff up, making sure that it's consistent. And this is where my photography comes in, as you would know, all these platforms, most directory platforms, accept photos. Even in case people are not aware of this, Apple Maps now accepts you to add photos on your Apple Maps listing. So every platform is looking for photos. The most special of them all, of course, is Google, because it's the only one that actually also accepts videos and virtual tours, because it uses the Google Street View technology, so you can add that, which is still an ultra special. That's sort of the creme de la creme, as I say. It's the best part. But all these platforms require you to add photos. So that's when I say, well, what photos do you already have? And are you happy with them? Are they a correct representation of your business? And this is where I can then sell my photography services. And then I say, well, before we actually publish this, we're going to need to get the shoot done. We're going to want to make sure that we have all this information updated correctly. And then we do a big push, basically publishing all this on all the platforms consistently. And then we can get into the next stages of marketing, which is making sure that all that big push then is, I usually will then, because I don't do on-page website SEO. I hand that over back to the web developers and people probably like yourself. For example, if you had a client that was a local SEO type client that you had built a site for, I would be saying, okay, now I'm going to give it to someone who specializes in on-page SEO so that they can do things like the schema markup, that's over my head. I understand what it is, but don't ask me to do that work. I don't want to do that. It's not my specialty. But I can at least guide the client then through the next stages to ensure that the data on the website will marry up properly with all the work we did in these directory platforms, and primarily Google. So that's my method for optimizing. And I actually have and I'm more than happy, you may want to end up probably sharing this out, but I actually have an infographic which is designed to show people all the key elements inside of a Google business profile. It looks almost like it's a pie chart with 11 sections in it. And it shows you that, of course, there's photos, there's videos, there's virtual tours, there's reviews, there's the SMS capability. All these things are little elements that you need to optimize for. So it's basically making sure people have addressed every single one of those elements thoroughly, making sure they got their products and services. When you put products up, you want to make sure that you've actually got photos of your product and a link back to your website for that product on the actual product description, all that stuff.
But since we're mentioning photos and images, according to your experience, how much AI we can allow to use?
Very little. I'll tell you, the only time I believe that AI becomes useful in imagery is probably in situations like creating infographics, if it doesn't mess them up,
Yeah.
or for corrections of an image, of a real image, for editing purposes. Like, for example, if I'm going to publish a photo of like my desk right now, which you can't see, is I've got all kinds of wires because I've got mixing consoles and stuff like that. If you wanted to have a photo of me behind my, sort of like a behind the scenes photo, I would clean up a lot of that with AI by using remove tools inside of Photoshop. That's okay, because really I'm not really misrepresenting myself. I'm simply cleaning up, and it's me. It's kind of like if somebody comes over for dinner, you clean the house.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same idea.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you've just frozen here.
Oh.
Are you still there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Oh, no, I can hear you a little bit. There, you're back.
Yeah. I can hear you very
yeah,
well.
okay, no, yeah. Okay, yeah. There's a bit of a dropout there.
Okay.
So as I was saying, I'll just repeat that so you can maybe cut that back in. Is if in the world of AI, it's okay to use it to do editing for images as long as you're using AI to help make things even more authentic, not to make it less authentic. Authenticity is critical in representing yourself in business. Which is why it's not just AI that I worry about when it comes to images. Stock images are just as bad, sometimes even worse. So yeah, the death of a website, like the last thing I want to see when I land on somebody's website is the same silly handshake shot, or the same people sitting around the computer, 6 people standing around a computer pointing at the computer. It's like, really? Like, you're not going to give me one of those again, right? It's not real. It's not you. Like, you need, like, I would rather people pull out their iPhones and take photos with their mobile phones and post that than use AI or stock images. If they really don't want to hire me, fine, or hire a photographer. Okay, if you don't have the budget, that's totally cool. Not everyone's got the budget for it. Use real photos. It's so critical. Use real videos. People buy you because of who you are authentically. If they can't figure out who you are, and if you can't present yourself authentically, just do the same. Just compare yourself to a business like you in some other part of the world that does a good job of how they show up authentically, and you'll see the difference.
Yeah.
Because
Actually,
we want to relate.
I totally understand this part. Personally, that's what I did on the homepage. I asked a few employees to take a selfie to be very, very simple. So we need to be very, very real. So no AI will trigger us as AI, or whoever sees this, you can see it's just a simple, not good picture of employees. So they can see that. That's very, very important lesson to give also from other people that spend too much time trying to over optimize images.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is the key here is it's not so much. It's that I actually don't consider that to be in the area of over optimization. I consider that to be very good optimization, and the next step up is a professional photo, but never a caricature, and never and never over photoshopped. It's got to look real. But like when I actually take photos of people, because I do a lot of headshots, for lawyers and for doctors and whatever the case is, and and for their Google business profiles and for their LinkedIn page and for when they're like even real estate agents, when they because they do their banners of themselves, that kind of thing. And I will Photoshop it to make them look their best self, but not beyond themselves. They must remain highly recognizable. You've got to be able to walk down the street and see that person and go, I know who you are because I saw your photo. It matches.
It matches. Yeah,
it matches.
Right. Okay, one thing that I ask everyone before they leave is when to fire clients.
Oh, good question.
Because everybody skip this question, but I want to hear you. How do you think when?
Yeah, usually the best time in my I haven't had to fire that many. I had to fire a few. It doesn't happen often. It's when they don't implement the work that you've done for them in a way that actually benefits them, because in the end, it's going to make you look bad too. So, for example, if I actually have done, let's say, a photo shoot for someone, and I give them these images to publish, all right? If they don't actually publish the images where they said they were going to, and they call me back for another shoot, well, I'm going to go, well, what about all the other images? Is it that they were bad? Were you not happy with them? And if so, why are you coming back to me? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Usually it has more to do with the fact that they actually don't know how to implement their own, the work that you've done. If they cannot actually, like, you want them to be, you want your customers ideally to go back to my be found, be seen, be trusted, the review. You want them to be so happy that they'll give you a review. And in that review, they put a link to the work that you did for them, so that they tell the world that they were so happy with what you've done. Yeah. Like, for example, I recently did I recorded in my home studio some podcasts for these women. One of them is she's a bookkeeper. She trains people in bookkeeping. The other one is a business coach. And they're not technical. They wanted somebody else to do the recording for them. And they love the way I've set it up for them. And they love the fact that I do all the multicam switching for them. And so they're going to be an ongoing client. They're the kinds of people that, well, there's no firing there. They're happy and I'm happy. I know they're wonderful people to work with. But it's because they're actually implementing the ideas that I'm sharing with them and the quality of the work that I'm giving them. They're actually utilizing it. That's usually when people use what you've provided them and they're doing it happily. And even better yet, if they're happily sharing it with others, that's an ideal client. The ones who don't do that, those are the ones, seriously, if they're not at that interested, find someone who's interested in what you offer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
for everyone who listens. Okay, Marc. Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, we had Marc Charette in our show today with the marvelous experience that managed to share with us today, and especially in local SEO. So once again, Marc, thank you very much for being here tonight with us.
I'm very glad to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.